So, Toby, we've just seen the very first budget from Labour government for 14 years. And it was striking. There was quite a lot in there, but I think overall, my overriding impression was that, bearing in mind how much we've heard in the media about the amount of bad news to expect from this, it wasn't as bad as I thought. What were your
agree.
thoughts?
I went into this thinking that I'm going to have lots of clients and small businesses crying, scrabbling around, trying to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to solve all of these problems. We've just been given a beating. And it appeared that every time there was one of those bad news announcements, there was also a little, a gift back to help the small businesses. And I don't think it was as bad as I was expecting by any stretch.
I think, the headline is that she's got to find £40 billion, which is a heck of a lot of money. And we were led to believe, or we were led to expect, a raft of measures, not all of which have come in. So I guess it's one of those situations whereby, you sort of peddle lots of doom and gloom, but actually in reality it's not as bad as you think. And I think that's really good news for the economy and for us locally, because people have almost been, I think, sitting on tenterhooks now for the last couple of weeks, waiting for this big fiscal event, expecting the worst, and the worst hasn't really come to fruition.
No, and one of the drivers that I thought seemed to be going through the budget is that some of that 40 billion was going to be done through efficiency savings and modernisation of how government and government department works and how the NHS works. My only fear on that is that whilst the numbers would work, so the Office of Budget Responsibility will agree with those numbers and then build those in, we all know how government departments work, and they're very clunky, and getting those changes through and how you do those efficiency savings, it's
not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be a quick fix. The devil is always in the detail, and we've literally just finished watching this. But I think for me, it seems as though that bank of money is being found through a number of measures. Obviously, through things that were much trialled in advance. The increase on business costs of national insurance. We expected that. We knew that was coming. VAT on public schools. We expected that. We knew it was coming, and it doesn't raise that much anyway. But there are some good news things in there. And yes, efficiency savings is another way they've done it. And I think, when we start to get into detail, there was quite a long piece that ultimately I think was around changing the rules. She's brought in a new metric that they've already met 2 years in advance. Well, you just invented the metric. But, that aside, I think it wasn't all bad news. And what I took away was, I'm thinking back to the last budget where housing wasn't even mentioned once. And housing is something that affects us nationally, but also, particularly here in West Oxfordshire, where the cost of housing is much higher than the average wage locally. So it's hugely unaffordable. And there was a whole segment on housing, which I think does reflect how seriously this administration is treating the housing bit. My key takeaway from that, my chief concern was, there's a lot of change in legislation at the moment around landlords and that is driving landlords out of the sector. As of tomorrow, the sort of unexpected increase in stamp duty land tax from 2% to 5%, the levy for additional properties, means not only are we losing landlords, but we are discouraging actively discouraging landlords from entering the sector. Yeah. And I think that's only going to exacerbate the shortage of private rental sector stock, and also increase the rate of rents that are being charged, because it's just simple supply and demand.
And it might be that's why she alluded and had that housing part in there, because they're almost going to try and nationalise the rental market by having affordable housing.
Well, yes, there was lots around, but of course, this is coming in as of tomorrow, and if we look at how long it takes to deliver new housing, then there's going to be a gap between those two, where I think the pain is going to be most acutely felt but I was really reassured to see that they're focusing on small builders, because we used to be a nation of small builders, and it's become sort of swamped by some big players now, the big sort of 5 or 6 building companies. But actually, if we are going to see growth in hitting construction targets, then it's going to be by the small and medium builders sort of getting back out there and putting bricks and mortar in the ground. So that was, I think, realistic and reassuring to see.
Yeah, and it did seem to very much focus on grassroots and trying to get that bedrock of grassroots, whilst also trying to get the investment from into the country from the big players.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was good to see. And I think in terms of social rents, the fact that the escalator is going to go up by CPI plus 1% is good news. That's been frozen for the last year and was below, or well below, what rents are being asked for at the moment. And so those people in receipt of universal credit are not getting the support they need to be able to rent a property in the private rental sector at the moment, and it creates, that divide has just been widening. So that was good to see as well.
I think for me, the only bad news that I was expecting and I thought might come down the road is the withdrawal of the exemption for the agricultural exemptions on inheritance tax. And whilst they didn't completely withdraw it, and they've still got that £1 million allowance, I think that could have a major impact on the farming community. And obviously we live in a very rural area, lots
absolutely.
of small farms. And with property prices, how big does your farm need to be to get to £1 million?
Yeah, not huge. And it was interesting, I thought, how that was presented in the budget, in that it wasn't, it was a case of, we're discounting it by 50%, i.e. we're only going to tax it 20%. But of course, that's going up to 20% from zero. And so that is a very significant change. And although it's dressed up as a 50% discount on the normal, 40% rate, it is a very significant change, going from 0 to 20%, which is going to have significant implications. What other things really struck you about the budget? Was there anything else in there that really jumped out at you?
Like I said, I think one of the things I did think is they're looking at the business rates and how they're going to reduce those sort of retail and hospitality sectors, which is desperately needed, especially in the independent sector.
Yep.
And they said they were going to fund that by increasing taxes on wealthy properties. I still think they need to look at how do you transfer some of that business rates onto an online platform, because you have very, very large organisations and they're not paying a fraction of the business
very low tax rates. Yeah, you are continuing to place that burden on those people who provide something on our high streets. And in a rural community, people rely on our town centres for their daily needs, and actually the businesses that operate in that environment are finding it increasingly difficult to shoulder that burden when they're up against online only or predominantly online retailers, and that is a difficult problem that I don't think has even started to be tackled.
No, and like I said, I think everyone knew that the increase in employers' national insurance, the evasion of answering the questions told everyone that was going to come along. But again, they've increased the allowance, for small businesses from 5 to 10.5. And I think, as Rachel Reeves said, you can employ 4 staff at the national living wage, and that's still break even. So I think that's a good thing for the small employers. Yeah,
I mean, there were a couple of what I call fools and horses moments. No income tax, no VAT, no money back, no guarantee. But she did sort of say half of that on 2 occasions. But I thought it was interesting that the sort of the stealth tax fiscal drag, they're not going to hold those bands, but those income tax bands are now going to increase with inflation. I thought was a really good thing. It means that people can now earn more next year and not be dragged into those higher tax bands, depending on where they sit. I thought that was really good. And it's those sorts of things around affordability that will support the housing market. Of course, we've had the budget now. People will be digesting that as we speak, and on the back of this. And, there'll be a Bank of England rate decision due very shortly. The American election, US election, is coming up around the corner. So I think that the bounce from this for the wider economy, for the housing market, for business in general is going to be positive because it's not as bad as we thought.
Yes, I was going to ask you actually, because obviously the capital gains rates, that could have had a major impact on your sector.
Yeah,
but I think the property is remaining the same.
Yeah, I think no major changes. So the stamp duty changes that were already baked in and announced haven't been overturned. So first time buyers will start to pay a bit more stamp duty from April of next year. That hasn't changed at all. But you know what? We knew that was going to be the case unless it was overturned. It wasn't overturned. So no real change there. And I think by far the biggest drivers for the housing market will be the next Bank of England rate decision, which is widely expected to be downwards. Here's hoping, but no, I think it should be, and that will see a resilient and busy housing market. And of course, here in West Oxfordshire, we are building very few new homes at the moment. And we are seeing net migration into the area. Again, I mentioned it before, supply and demand. We have seen and will continue to see, I believe, house prices increasing here in West Oxfordshire because we face a very sort of regional economy.
Yeah. So I think overall, better than we expected. And I think there's opportunities for that budget to really give some decent growth to the economy, especially locally. And if it works, it's a good budget.
Absolutely. And I think for the small businesses and the medium businesses that you advise from an accountancy perspective, there's going to be a lot in the detail, a lot around, how much does that mean for me paying in terms of business rates and increases in national insurance. Quite a few exemptions and things that were brought in for businesses employing 4 or fewer people. So those really small businesses are going to be exempted from those increases. But quite a lot of work for you to do to work out what this means for your clients going forwards, I suspect.
I think so. I mean, one of the things that I was slightly grateful for is because we play in the small business marketplace, I won't have a huge amount of people coming to me with the removal of the non-dom status. So that'll be for the bigger practices to deal with that one.
Yeah, that's a London market thing. Yeah, absolutely. We're not worried about it in the Shire.
But as you say, it's always the devil is in the detail of when that comes out. But headlines look fine. And now I can start when clients are asking me a question. 2 days ago, I was, the answer was, well, wait and see. Whereas now
we know. So no, really useful. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with that. Let's head to the pub and enjoy our 1p off on the pint. Thank you.